All right, time and eternity. Boethius's discussion of time and eternity in Book 5, Section 6, is going to be one of the most important discussions of the distinction between time and eternity. He's going to give us definitions that even still today stick around when we try to comprehend what does it mean to speak of eternity. And you have to understand the context. So the context of what's going on here is that Boethius is in prison. He's waiting to die. He's on, I wouldn't say he's on trial. He's not on trial. He's in prison waiting to die for something he probably did not do. And he's trying to think through, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Which is still a really important discussion to have. And it's a question that Boethius is trying to answer philosophically. And because he's trying to answer it philosophically, don't mind me, I'm gonna roll my window. There's some people who pulled in right next to me. So I don't want them to, I don't know. If they want this knowledge, they can find it on my YouTube channel, I guess. So there's an important discussion to be had about why, if there is a God, as the Christians understand God, because Boethius is a Christian, why is God allowing bad things to happen to good people? And this gets into the issue of God's omniscience, his omnipresence, right? Like, why his omnipotence? Why is God, if he's all-knowing, all-powerful, and everywhere all at once, why is he not stopping evil things? And if God is all of these things, how could there ever be such a thing as free will? And as we get toward the end of the book, that's sort of the question that Boethius is dealing with, this idea of free will. If God knows the future, then how could a person ever have any choice in what happens? That's a legitimate question, right? If God knows that an event is going to take place, then how is God's knowledge of the event not a direct cause of the event? So, there are a couple things I want to get clear here. First is that in Book 5, Section 6, Boethius gives us an extremely important definition on time and eternity. He says, eternity then is the complete, simultaneous, and perfect possession of everlasting life. The complete, simultaneous, and perfect possession of everlasting life. So let me put this another way. God exists in one eternal now, and that now completely possesses all of himself. And through possessing himself, he in turn possesses knowledge of all things. So if you imagine sort of a pyramid shape or a triangle, the apex of the pyramid is sort of this single point of now that is possessing everything that extends downward. And if you imagine that what extends downward and goes across is sort of like a timeline, in this one eternal now, God is perceiving all of time. That's Boethius's argument. So good. He's possessing all of time. Okay, but that doesn't answer the question. If God possesses knowledge of all of time in one single instant now, then how is his knowledge of the future, what we perceive as the future, but God is still experiencing as now, how is that not a cause of it? So Boethius's answer gets into this distinction of two different types of necessity. There's something that is happening because you're perceiving it, and in that way it is necessary. And there's another thing that is necessary because you are doing it. So he uses the example of the sun rising versus a person walking. And I'm not going to get too much into that because I see that we've got some answers on the discussion board regarding that. Maybe we can kind of flesh it out there. By the discussion board, I mean Google Classroom, whatever. So what you need to understand is that knowledge as a kind of vision is extremely important, especially in the medieval period, and how they begin to work out what does it mean to understand as God understands. So later on in section 6, Boethius writes, since therefore all judgments comprehend those things that are subject to it according to its own nature, and since the state of God is ever that of eternal presence, his knowledge too transcends all temporal change and abides in the immediacy of his presence. Immediacy is kind of the key term there. That in one single immediate now, God perceives all of everything. It embraces all the infinite recesses of past and future and views them in the immediacy of its knowing as though they are happening in the present. If you wish to consider then the foreknowledge or prevision by which he discovers all things, it will be more correct to think of it not as a kind of foreknowledge of the future, but as the knowledge of a never-ending presence, so that it is better called providence or looking forth than prevision or seeing beforehand. So let me put this another way. When we think of the future, we have to kind of use our imagination to imagine something that hasn't happened yet. But God isn't imagining something that hasn't happened yet, Boethius argues. God is instead seeing it just as equally as he is seeing the past and the now. We are kind of stuck in the present. Our now is in the present, but God's now is also in the present, but it obtains and possesses past, present, and future in one eternal now. And that's what we mean by God sees all of this. So this is what we mean by a kind of vision, but this also gets into the question of how is it that God can see the future without causing the future? And Boethius gives a kind of answer. You're welcome to disagree with this answer. Just know that it takes into account different types of necessity that he distinguishes between. But just as I can see the mountains beyond me, that doesn't mean I'm causing the mountains beyond me. Just because I can see the waves crashing, that doesn't mean I'm causing the waves crashing. And just because God can see the future in one eternal now, that doesn't mean that human choice is unnecessary. I shouldn't use unnecessary, because Boethius has a very particular use of necessary. Just because I make a choice, that doesn't mean my choice goes unnoticed, and it doesn't mean my choice is irrelevant. That's a better term. Just because God can see the future and know my free will choices, that doesn't mean my choices are irrelevant because God can see them. And Boethius is going to liken it analogously to something like seeing the mountains, seeing the waves crashing, seeing people right in front of you. Just because I see a person right in front of me, that doesn't mean I'm causing their choices. And just because God can perceive all of time in one single moment and grasp it all simultaneously, that doesn't mean he's causing it. So, let me show you why I'm in my car for one moment. I'm gonna take my keys out because I'm a little bit paranoid about accidentally locking stuff in my car. But hopefully I can turn this around. Let's see, I'm not going to be able to because I am not well equipped with technology. But I am out here on Route 46 overseeing the Pacific Ocean. And what I'm going to show you is why people liken God's knowledge to that of vision. So, this is the mountains that extend beyond. That's the Pacific Ocean out there in Morro Bay. And just because you can see it all doesn't mean you're causing it all. And one of the nice things about being in California is you can see a lot at one single moment, right? You're not kind of trapped by the trees of Florida. You can get up on a mountain and see everything in one single moment. And this is why people will liken God's knowledge to that of vision. Because when you see all of this, you're taking in a lot of information in one single moment. And this would be analogous to how God perceives time. He sees all of this in one single moment. So, if you've never seen the Pacific Ocean, there it is. Enjoy. But that's Boethius, that's time and eternity. And this is why knowledge is a kind of vision, that in one single moment, God can perceive everything. And just because he perceives it happening, that doesn't necessarily mean he's causing it to happen. And this is how Boethius works out the issues of free will, divine foreknowledge, and why time and eternity and distinguishing between the two has a huge effect on what it means to be human.